Things just got worse and worse and worse as the night went on. Again, valiant effort down the stretch for the Bucs. Just too little, too late. Let's go down and let's see what Coach Fletch and the rest of the crew has to say. As always, go Bulls. So let's head into the locker room right now and see what the guys have to say about that one. Wow. Where do the Buccaneers go from here? What an incredible atmosphere. What a good win for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They snapped a 7-game winning streak. How we feeling, Bucs Nation? It's time to party, baby.
This is one of those days where I am so happy that I decided to do this. Welcome to the Recher podcast. I am your host, Jay Recher. Follow me on all social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. I am everywhere. And right here on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe, because every single like, every single share, every subscription certainly does help. What a show we have for you today. And of course, topic A, B, C, D, and E. Is Liam Coen spurning the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to go up to Jacksonville to be the head coach of the Jaguars? We want to hear your opinions all show long. Questions, comments, concerns, put them there at the screen. Make sure you hit that like button as well. Very interactive on the program today. We're going to do something today on the show that I've never done before. It's going to be a three-headed monster. We're running the three-man weave at 12:15, about 13 and a half minutes away from right now. We've got Greg Auman from Fox Sports. We've got Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report. The three of us are going to get together and we're going to wax poetic about what the hell has happened with Liam Coen leaving the Tampa Bay Buccaneers after verbally agreeing to return as the offensive coordinator to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll do that for pretty much the entirety of the 12 o'clock hour. At 1 o'clock, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the other team that the Glazers own. That's Manchester United. Mark Ogden, the senior soccer writer for ESPN, is going to join us. Don't you guys find it kind of funny that this team right here, owned by the same people as the Buccaneers, they never play hockey? They never play soccer here in the Tampa Bay area? Kind of crazy, huh? And we'll talk all things Manchester United with Mark Ogden. 1:30 today. My guy, Jamal St. here. We've been going back and forth for the last week or so from WJXT up there in Jacksonville. We got to get the Jacksonville perspective. We're hearing a lot about the Tampa perspective. Let's hear the Jacksonville perspective. And I'm not talking about those whack-ass tweets and whack-ass replies that we're seeing on social media. My goodness, you guys are bad. Jacksonville fans, man, you guys got to bring a little more heat than that. You're missing the context on everything. And I usually don't like to get in the mud. That's my former co-host, Zach Blobner. That's his thing. He loves doing it. But I decided to get in the mud a little bit last night and try to go back and forth with some of these Jacksonville fans. But my goodness, man, you guys really need to step your game up in a situation like this. So Jamal St. are going to join us again, WJXT at 1:30, and then at 1:50 today, I will give you my picks for the NFC and AFC Championship games. Exciting football matchups this week as the Buffalo Bills travel to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs, and the Washington Commanders head to their NFC rivals, the Eagles, and play them in Philadelphia. Wow, it is it's incredible. And I want to get to yours comments here real quick. David Terry, Jay Bird, happy Friday, Hermano. Turncoat Cohen could have handled that with some integrity and honesty. Thought says Jay could never leave us, would never leave us. Never leave you guys. I want to say never. I'm not Liam Coen. Never say never. You don't know what's out there. Dolan G, what up, Jay? Happy Friday to help with Coen. Obviously, he was going to take a head coaching job eventually, but the way it was a little unprofessional. Lady Evil J, I am crushed. The only thing really helped me through this was listening to you, Sammer, and Stank this morning when I came to work. Thanks to that, you guys put all my thoughts into words. And Anthony saying, I know Jay wouldn't snake us. You got that right, buddy. And I was last night. I was on Pewter Report with Matt Matera, with Scott Reynolds. And I hopped on with my guys with the loose cannons, with Sammer and Stank, I just had so many opinions. I had to get it all out there. I didn't give them all, everything I had, because I was saving that for you guys here at noon. And again, kill that like button, share this on your social media platforms, like and subscribe on YouTube, because this is a huge, huge topic today when it comes to Tampa Bay sports. And let's not forget, Lightning back in action tonight. I just got off the phone with the Bolts, our fireside chat, and I'll announce this now. Every year, Julian Breezebaugh does his fireside chat with some of the local media. That's actually going to be this Monday at 11 a.m. So the Recher podcast is going to be moved back an hour. we're going to do the podcast at 1 p.m. on Monday. I'll announce it a couple of times through the show. J Retro Podcast starts at 1 p.m. on Monday because I have been asked to be part of the Julian Breezeball fireside chat over there at Amalie Arena, just a select number of media participants there. And we get to kind of ask Julian some questions on the record, off the record, and I'll be able to report back to you on Monday the things that I can report back to you. Lightning back in action tonight in Chicago against the Blackhawks. 8 o'clock puck drop tonight. In action tomorrow against Detroit. 7 o'clock puck drop. So keep an eye on that as well. And it'll be good to see the boys back home next week. Finally, Chicago, Kings, Islanders, Senators. I miss the Bolts. It feels like they haven't been at Amalie Arena for a long time, for an extended period of time since December. So we need our boys back. Domingo, Patrick, too many hyper emotional reaction. Many need to step back and breathe. First, Climactic says on to the next OC. Keep those takes coming. Bring them this way. I want to hear them. What are your thoughts on Liam Coen leaving the Buccaneers to take the job in Jacksonville for the Jaguars? And I'll start right here. In life, it's not always what you do, it's how you do it. It's not always what you say, it's how you say it. It's not the fact that Liam Coen left the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and took the head coaching job at the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's how he did it. If you're ever going to make a change in your profession or in your life, I think if you're the person getting that news, you would want the person to be transparent, open, and honest. Keep the lines of communication open. You may not like the message that you're getting, but at least the person giving it to you had the guts to look you in your eye, shake your hand, and tell you that's what it was going to be. I didn't get fired from iHeart over the phone, right? They brought me into the office. They looked me in the eye. They shook my hand, and that was it. That's the way it's supposed to go. And the fact that Liam Coen was literally ghosting the people that gave him the opportunity here in Tampa Bay is something that is beyond reproach. Again, I don't fault the guy if initially he went to go take that job. And I don't fault him for changing his mind. The situation changed. Trent Baalke was out of there. He looked at the situation going, hey, this might be different for me. I got no issue with that. It's a free country. You're allowed to change your mind. But once you start snaking around and once you start avoiding phone calls and once you start kind of doing things behind people's backs, that is when it takes another turn. That is when it goes from, hey, you may like it but disagree with it, to that's shady business. That is not the way that you're supposed to go about your business. I don't care if it's the NFL. I don't care if it's sports. That is life. You're not going to please everybody. But the way that Liam Coen handled himself, that's not professional. That's not how a real man would do something like that. Go look, not right now because I don't want you to leave. Go look at the article written by Albert Breer today. Albert Breer has done such a great job of documenting this entire thing. And usually when you get in situations like this, you understand that it's usually one side and the other side, and you wait for some clarity and you wait for an article to really depict everything that has gone on. So as I open up that article with Albert Breer, I start going down and reading the entire thing, word for word, and realizing that this doesn't paint Liam Coen in a better light. It only makes him look worse. So after you have that change of heart, and after you realize, like, hey, I should probably take this job in Jacksonville. After 5 p.m. on Wednesday, when you told Jason, like, hey, I'm not going to be able to come by today. I'm going to do it tomorrow. And then you literally ghost everyone involved. Liam Coen ghosted Mike Greenberg. He ghosted Jason Light. He ghosted Todd Bowles. And then when he calls Todd Bowles at 5 o'clock, he tells him, yeah, I'm thinking about the offer, and there's been some new things that have come up. I'm going to look into it. Little did he know that a little birdie in the Jacksonville offices let somebody know in the Tampa Bay offices that Liam Coen was already there. This is part of the reason why, when everybody was saying, I don't care about Todd Bowles. Let's get rid of him and promote Liam Coen. This was one of those unknown things that we had no clue about. How would Liam Coen handle adversity? How would he handle a situation where it wasn't going in his favor? Is that a guy that's going to buckle his bootstraps and say, I'm here for better or worse? Or is he going to hit the road? It kind of makes a lot of sense now when you see that he's been now to 8 different places in the last 8 years. I retweeted an article last night from the University of Kentucky where Liam Coen told him, yeah, this is a place that I want to plant some roots and I want to spend a couple of years here. Listen, I know things change, but why say something like that? Why say something like that when the 5-6 years before you were at a different stop, you were doing a different thing each time? This guy speaking out of both sides of his mouth, I can't trust him as far as I can throw him. And again, you can fault Todd Bowles all that you want. You can say that you hate his clock management. You could say that you hate that he doesn't make the necessary adjustments on defense, or you don't like the guys that he deploys as his coaches. Fine. You can have issues with Todd Bowles as a coach, but you will never, ever have issues with Todd Bowles, the man and the leader. Think about that. Even if you're a Todd Bowles hater, even if you don't think Todd Bowles is a good coach, and we've seen this before in the National Football League, where coaches have issues, they don't do too well, offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, and murmurs start coming out. And people start talking. Whether it's, like, let's say Todd Bowles, a defensive guy, whether it's guys on your defense, well, I don't believe in this defense. Man, maybe if we change some things up, we'd be more successful. You don't hear that. You don't hear that from Levante David, the captain of the defense. You don't hear that from the last guy, the fourth corner, or the fifth defensive lineman. Nobody's bitching and moaning about Todd Bowles. You know why? Because they respect not just the coach, but the man. Offensive side of the ball. We've seen this, and we've heard this before, going back to the Dungy days, where the defense was carrying a lot of the water, and there was resentment between the offense and the defense. Did you hear that at all this year? These guys scoring 30 points a game, Baker Mayfield balling out even when he loses his receivers. Did you hear Mike Evans? Did you hear some of the other veterans? Did you hear even the rookies talking smack about Todd Bowles and the defense? Not one bit. These things leak out. You see it in every sport. Hell, you see it in every aspect of life. I had a feeling that there was something off with Liam Coen, the leader, not the play caller, but the guy in charge. Too many stops on his resume. And now, I don't care. It's not about being proven right, but now you see why. Again, I go back. You can question everything you want about Todd Bowles as a defensive coach, as a play caller, fine. You will never be able to question the integrity and the character of that man. Liam Coen can't say the same thing. Can't. It's not about being mad. Again, like I think a lot of us were resigned to the fact that he was going to leave anyway. So it is what it is. Like, hey, all right, go up to Jacksonville, do your thing. You're going to be persona non grata here in Tampa, out of sight, out of mind. Fine, whatever. Deuces. But it's the fact that he was able, in his mind, to rationalize not treating Jason Light and Todd Bowles and Mike Greenberg with the utmost respect and at least the dignity to let them know what was going on. Yeah, the Buccaneers put it in his contract that he couldn't go interview a second time. Why wouldn't you? And it gets you thinking, right? It gets you thinking. Why do you think they put that in there? They must have known that something like this could have been a possibility. We go back to the Kyler Murray thing, right? They put that in his contract. Yeah, you got to focus on playing Or you got to focus on studying. You got to focus on getting into your playbook, right? Why put that in there? Why put that in there if it's something that you don't need? Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. I'm going to try to get my guys, Scott Reynolds and Greg Auman. Scott is coming on right now. Greg will join us here in a second. Let's bring in our guy from Pewter Report. Oh, they're both in there at the same time. There we go. We'll bring them in. This is the kind of thing that we have to do when we have such good news in the Tampa Bay area. This is like the Avengers assembling here. We got Scott Reynolds from Pewter Report, Greg Auman from Fox Sports. Guys, thanks so much for joining me. I mean, the last 24 hours, Scott, we'll start with you. The last 24 hours, not really anything going on with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's good to be with you, Jay and Greg. This has been a crazy turn of events. I haven't seen anything like this in my 30 years covering the team. You know, it's unfortunate the way it happened. You can't fault Liam Coen for wanting to take one of 32 opportunities, right, to be a head coach. There's only 32 in the league. And I think what would have made the situation better, because if you look at how Dave Canales handled his departure, right, from Tampa to Carolina, Todd Bowles, Jason Light, they still have strong affection for Dave Canales. This is a different situation, though, because he gave the Glazers, Jason Light, Todd Bowles, Baker Mayfield, the offensive coaching staff, his word that he would stay in Tampa Bay and not take that second interview. And after Shad Khan had fired Trent Baalke and reached out to Liam Coen, I think of Liam Coen at that point in time, or at the point where he agreed to go to Jacksonville and have that face-to-face meeting with Shad Khan. If he would have called Todd Bowles or Jason Light or somebody in the front office at that point in time and said, listen, I've given this some more thought. Shad Khan's reached back out to me. I want to be above board and let you know kind of where my head's at. And I think that would have been a very disappointing situation for the Buccaneers, for Todd Bowles especially. He's got to find his fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. But the way that it transpired, doing it kind of underhanded, telling Todd Bowles, hey, I'm interested, kind of after the fact, after he'd already met with Shad Khan in the 5 o'clock hour, that's where it went from disappointment to absolutely livid over at one Buccaneer place last night.
Yeah, and then Greg, I'm sure all of us have read the Albert Breer article, kind of detailing step-by-step process of what happened. And as Scott just alluded to, Greg, I think that's one of the big things that stood out to me is, all right, once you know that in your mind you're thinking of a change, you don't go radio silent on Thursday there and not pick up anybody's phone. And then you call Todd Bowles at 5 o'clock saying, oh, yeah, okay, I'm thinking about it. And then a little birdie from the Jacksonville front office let somebody know in Tampa, like he's already here.
Yeah.
Like, again, kind of building off of what Scott said, Greg, it's not always what you do, it's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, if you told me like 3 days ago that Coen was taking the Jaguars job, I wouldn't have been surprised.
Right.
It made sense. Once Ben Johnson was out of the picture, a lot of people had him at the top of their list. So I think what stings is what Scott said, is that there was a moment where they had tried, you could tell reading what Albert wrote, that they kind of laid things out like very preemptively, going back to the weekend, going back to Monday. What would it take for you to stay? Asked for a number, got him that number. Okay, let's sign here. And then there's hemming and hawing for 2 days. And then again, reached an agreement to where you're patting them on the back for doing a good job of avoiding what seemed like an inevitable loss for them this offseason. And I think for them to then put it out there, hey, he's staying.
Yeah.
It gives your fans all this, excitement.
Yeah.
Wow, maybe they won't have to make a change to offensive coordinator. Legit joy. I think I talked to people that were like, wow, this is the best news of the offseason. There's no one they'll draft. There's no one they'll sign that will do more to help their chances of winning than just keeping Liam Coen. So, again, as said, the way it shook out, the way he handled it, again, I think we should try, as media, as fans, anybody, try and remember Liam Coen for what he did on the field, what he helped the Bucs do this season, and not the awkward 48 hours that ended things very badly.
Yeah, and I think that's going to take a little while, right? Because people, and partially because of what you just said, partially because there was a joy, there was a rejoice. Like, an exhale of, "Phew, man, I thought he was leaving. Now he's staying." But the way now that he's left, Scott, it leaves such a sour taste in your mouth. And then when you see this detailed account from Albert, and you go, "All right, well, he wanted more money after he got the 4.5 million." They're like, "All right, he went back, wanted even more money." And I also wonder, the Buccaneers said, "Hey," they put it in that deal of, "We don't want you to take a second meeting with the Jacksonville Jaguars." Do you think that has anything to do? Well, I know obviously part of it is you want to retain the guy. You're willing to spend that money on a coordinator. But also, did they look at his track record? Did they look at a history going, "Man, you've been here. You've been to 8 different places in 8 years." I tweeted it out last night, guys. I don't know if you saw it. Kentucky, a guy on 3 in Kentucky wrote the article saying, Liam Coen said, "I'm going to plant roots here. I'm going to be here for a couple of years." Do you think that the Buccaneers front office kind of had that in their mind, Scott? Like, we got to be careful with this guy because he's been known to jump ship.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. I'll say 2 things. Number one, even if he had signed a contract to be the highest paid offensive coordinator, let's say he came in, did that first thing Thursday morning, and then still got on a plane and went to Jacksonville, met with Shad Khan. The signed contract wouldn't have meant anything because at any point in time, I mean, he was under contract as it is. All this was a contract for a raise. So he was already under contract. NFL rules state that coordinators cannot be prohibited for taking a promotion, which is a head coaching job, right? That's the same thing. You can't block somebody from taking a play calling role as a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. If you're an assistant, you can't do the same thing if you're under contract as an offense or defensive coordinator from keeping someone from becoming a head coach. NFL rules are clear with that. So even if he had signed on the dotted line, that contract didn't mean anything. He still could have made this choice. So I just want to kind of clear that up because some people say, well, he didn't sign the contract. Even if he did, he was already under contract. This was a new contract for more money. That's it. The second thing I'll say is when you look at kind of how this whole thing transpired, there are some out there, and I understand it, and I've never advocated for Todd Bowles to be fired. I know that there is a contingent of this fan base that said, well, see, the Buccaneers should have fired Todd Bowles and just made this guy the head coach to begin with. I mean, I've heard some things, and this is not Johnny-come-lately news, and I'm not gonna divulge what I've learned, but this was during the course of the season while everybody was feeling good about Liam Coen and also getting a little worried about losing Liam Coen. There were some attributes that were on display that gave the organization some pause to not pursue that for reasons. And, this integrity matters. And say what you want about Todd Bowles. I've criticized some of his defensive doings and clock management. I've also praised him for keeping this team together. Greg, you're in that locker room with me every day. You will not find anybody on or off the record that will, there's no dissension. And this has been the same way the last 2 years, even during a 4-game losing streak and 2 back-to-back seasons at 4-6 and 4-7. There was no breaking of the ranks. That locker room is lockstep. It is a culture that is together. I've never seen anything like it. In my 30 years, I've never seen a locker room as tight-knit as this one is. Todd Bowles deserves credit for that. Part of being a head coach is culture building, and Jason Light and he deserve a ton of credit for that. When you see an instance like this and how Liam Coen handled that situation, and listen, this may be just a growing pain. He might go to Jacksonville and become the next Sean McVay and learn from this and whatever, right? We don't know what the future holds. But maybe the Buccaneers dodged a bullet here because, not everybody who gets the offensive coordinator to head coach pathway becomes Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan. Sometimes it's Dirk Cutter, and it just didn't work out. Sometimes it's Mike McDaniels, and it just is not working out. So who knows what the future holds? We're not living in a Marvel multiverse where we can go down a different timeline and see, well, what would Liam Coen have done as a head coach here? He might have been better than Bowles got this team to a Super Bowl, or he might have just kind of kept this thing as you're going to win maybe the worst division of football every year and then not really do much in the playoffs. Or he might have turned this ship aground and sank it. We just don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was actually looking because I had like a Kevin Kiermaier Iron Man thing, so I was trying to find it amongst the rubble over here. But you're right. I think that's another thing and why I had apprehension, guys, of making that move because change isn't always for the better.
Yeah.
And let's say he speaks out of both sides. Let's say Liam Coen gets the job, right?
Yeah.
And then next year he says something and it rubs Mike Evans out of all people the wrong way.
Yeah.
Now you're upsetting the apple cart and you're ruffling the feathers of a lockstep locker room that even through adversity the last couple of years has persevered, and you guys are in there every day, haven't heard a peep of dissension or discontent, which is great. Greg, do you think this harms Liam Coen going forward, or is this just one of those situations where people will look at it and go, it probably wasn't as clean, but it isn't going to affect how he builds his staff and players wanting to go play there in Jacksonville?
No, I don't think it affects those things at all. And I think, again, once he's had a product on the field, once he wins or loses, that's how he'll be known in Jacksonville. Exactly. I don't think anybody discounts Bill Belichick and the number of Super Bowls he's been to because he was Jets coach for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Billy Donovan, great coach, went to the Orlando Magic for a couple hours and changed his mind. So they're really, honestly, older, wiser, better coaches than Liam Coen that have had mistakes like this or missteps like this, where you're going to do one thing and you just had to do another. And again, it's one of those where that's who we think of right now. It's how we remember Liam Coen because it was yesterday.
Yeah.
But again, if at the end of this year, if they're 10-7 in Jacksonville, no one's going to be talking about, gosh, you kind of misplayed that stuff at the end with the Bucs.
Yeah.
And if they're 4-13, no one's going to worry about that. So it's one of those where he'll be judged on the field. I think it's a little bit, I've forgotten this, but when Liam got the Bucs job a year ago, there was a lot, when you have a coach come into your market or your team, how they're received by the team they just left can tell you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Kentucky fans weren't happy with Liam Coen.
Right.
He had left them twice in 3 years.
Yep.
Again, lots of college coaches tell recruits they're not leaving, tell players they're not leaving, they leave. Liam's not alone in this boat.
Right.
There's a tweet. This is funny to see this. There's a tweet from February 2nd of last year. Coen is on Twitter, but hasn't tweeted since he was a Kentucky assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And in response to his last tweet with Kentucky, which is just a normal picture of him on the sidelines, the tweet says, "Let Tampa Bay know you'll be leaving after one season. Zero loyalty to people. Your word means nothing at this point."
Wow.
Where it's like, wow, okay, that kind of hits a little close to home today. Anyway,
Was that from Nostradamus?
I know, right? And again, I think it's just angry Kentucky fans that wanted him back for another year there.
Yeah.
He's a good coach. People will miss him when he's gone because they liked having him on their team. But again, in this case, he's leaving a little less delicately than some people do.
I want to ask both of you guys this question. Any concern, Greg, we'll start with you and mix it up a little bit. Greg, any concern that the next offensive coordinator, I don't want to talk about the specific guys yet, any concern that Baker Mayfield is going to take a step back next year?
Well, I mean, he could. He had a really good year. I mean, when you have 41 touchdowns, 4,500 yards, he could have Coen next year and take a step back. So I don't want to set the bar for a successful season for Baker Mayfield at 41 touchdowns and 4,500 yards. I think he'll do well to lower his interceptions. I think he's, again, it's not something you want to get good at, but his entire career has been adjusting to new offenses and new coordinators every single year. He's got 7 coordinators in 7 years. So you feel bad for the guy. Bowles has kind of done the same thing with offensive coordinators as a head coach. It's not something you want to do, but it's kind of like, hey, Chris Godwin, he's been through a major rehab before. Mm-hmm. He's going to be okay going through it this time because he knows he's done it before.
Yeah. I agree. And I was going to say too, to Greg's point, I think it's exactly right. Liam Coen could still be here and Baker Mayfield could take a step back. I mean, Todd Bowles has had this relatively the same scheme, certainly using Antoine Winfield Jr. the same way. And Winfield had 4 years of really good production with that contract year being just amazing, out of this world production. And then took a massive step back this year. Granted, injuries played a role in that, but I'm just saying that's a prime example. Still in the same system with the same coaches, and yet there was a regression there. So it could have happened with Baker Mayfield and Liam Coen again. And you don't start from the same spot that you finished. Right. In football, every year at every level, from Pop Warner to the NFL, it starts with you're 0-0 tied for first place with everybody else, and you have to build your team all the way back up.
Scott, I know you guys at Pewter Report have already started compiling a list of candidates. One guy that I like is Nick Caley from the Rams. He's a guy that seems to be the favorite for the Jets job with Aaron Glenn. He's that kind of next young guy working under Sean McVay. I know you got a whole slew of guys over at pewterreport.com.
Yeah.
But who are some of the names that really stand out to you that think that could be a realistic option for the new OC?
Two guys kind of come to mind. One actually interviewed for the job last year, and he's another Sean McVay disciple, and that's Jake Peetz, who was the pass game coordinator in LA, actually replaced Liam Coen in that role when Coen went to Kentucky. And then he found a job with Seattle as the pass game coordinator there under Ryan Grubb, who got fired this offseason. But they interviewed him, and they came away with a pretty good impression of him. And again, another Sean McVay disciple, would probably have very similar styles with their background in terms of that. So he's someone that could come in. Maybe he brings his own staff. Maybe he keeps the staff intact here because of the familiarity. He coached with Kevin Carberry out in LA, for example. A name in-house that is very well thought of in the walls of One Buccaneer Place is Josh Grizzard, the pass game coordinator. He made such an impression on Miami that he was hired by Brian Flores, that when Flores left and Mike McDaniels came aboard, he kind of got demoted from receivers coach to quality control or offensive assistant. But McDaniels still thought enough of him to keep him around. And he was kind of a bit of a cherry hire when the Buccaneers brought him aboard to be the pass game coordinator, kind of like Liam Coen's right-hand man in the passing game. And he was in charge of third downs. If you look, Tampa Bay was the best team in the league with 51.1% third down conversions. And even in the playoff game, third downs weren't a problem. They converted about 55, 56%. So with Grizzard in place, he's a young, up-and-coming guy, bright guy out of Yale. He might be an in-house option if they feel that, wait a minute, we're not going to do this to Baker and Mike and Chris and Buck, these guys, and give another system to learn, new verbiage and terminology. Let's not blow this thing up and start over. Let's keep the assistant coaches here. Remember, Cohen's probably going to be able to take one with him to be his offensive coordinator and title only. But a lot of those new assistants he brought in, they signed 2-year deals, so they're not eligible to even leave. You can't make a lateral move in the NFL from offensive line coach to offensive line coach. If I had to guess, Greg, maybe Brian Picucci, given his background with Kentucky, where he coached, and those two go back to UMass when Picucci was a coach on the UMass staff. Coen was a quarterback. That might be the guy with familiarity that comes to Jacksonville, bring some of that O-line knowledge that they'll need there to protect Trevor Lawrence and get that ground game going. So I would say Jake Peetz might be an external guy to keep in mind because of the familiarity. They've already interviewed him. And then Josh Grizzard in-house.
What about you, Greg? I know Thad Lewis is another name people are just wondering about because he, I think if he was higher up on the list, maybe he would already had the job, right? What about Thad and any other names that you're hearing or keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, like Scott said, Josh Grizzard makes a lot of sense in-house. Third down's probably about what they did best. That was the best third down season in team history, best third down team in the NFL. But again, I think one of the nice things that Liam Coen did is that he had everybody in that staff involved. So you had Grizzard working on third downs. You had Thad Lewis working on the red zone. I think it's 2-minute drill with somebody else. I'm forgetting. I'm blanking on. I think
McClendon was the 2-minute. Yeah.
So BMAC, all those guys know this offense well. And if continuity is your goal, if trying to not bring in, there might be better outside candidates you could bring in. But again, you're teaching a new language to an entire offense again. I don't think they want to do that. So I think if it's an outside hire, I think it's somebody who's probably come up in the same general offense that Liam Coen had. I think that was part of the benefit to Liam is that Baker had been in that offense only for 6-7 weeks. So like you said, Jake Peetz would make sense by that. Nick Caley would make sense like that. Nick Caley is a guy, I did a story on The Athletic on John Carroll University, the school in Ohio that just produces an amazing amount of NFL coaches over the year. Nick Caley is a John Carroll guy. So I talked to him for that story. It's weird. He's on Twitter, has a private account, but he follows me. So I've talked to Nick Caley, not necessarily about Tampa, about this job. Again, another guy who's come up in the right offense, in the right system, has not been a play caller yet. It's wild to think you could roll the dice and have 3 straight offensive coaches who had never been NFL play callers and ask them to be NFL play callers and hit on all 3, but he's kind of got 2 or 3 done already. So I wonder if that gives them confidence to trust another young assistant with a similar background like that. If you're going for continuity, again, they got guys on their own staff right now where you can do that from inside. Maybe if you hire from inside your own staff, you don't have to pay quite the paycheck they were willing to pay Liam Coen. That might free up some money for you to upgrade in replacing the defensive losses they're taking right now as well. So I think there's some benefits to that as well. But more than anything, you're rolling the dice. This is a third hire in 3 years. The first two have worked out remarkably well, both in what they did in Tampa and what they did to leave Tampa after only 1 year. I don't say you want to take a step back. If this hire is good enough to be a head coach again, that speaks really well for the season they had in 2025.
I mean, who does that? I mean, Greg, who does that? Is that a Jason Light notch in the cap, a little feather in the cap? Is that a Todd Bowles, or is it just the entire Bucs organization, you think?
Probably both, but definitely Bowles. I mean, Bowles is probably the guy that gets the last say on who his OC is. And I mean, I think it's neat in that this comes from when Bruce Arians was the head coach. Todd Bowles had a lot of autonomy on defense. Yeah. You're basically a head coach on defense. That weak side coordinator is such a huge thing in the NFL. And it's neat because Bruce Arians did that with Todd Bowles because he'd known him for 35 years. Mm-hmm. And what's cool is that Bowles has had the same trust and the same autonomy to Dave Canales, who he did not know at all, and to Liam Coen, who he really didn't know at all. Both these guys are really late in the interview process. We talk about why do these teams go and interview 8-9 candidates. Those guys weren't in the first round. And if people in the first round had maybe taken the job, they would have never even gotten here for an interview. So I think it's why you turn to depth and looking and uncovering every stone you can to find the right guy. It might be he's the ninth guy you interview, but he might be the guy that you connect with the most, and it might work out really well. So like I said, I think this is something where they've had good success with it twice. Yeah. That definitely speaks well to Todd Bowles. Anyone that said, oh, the offense is all Cohen's only here because Todd Bowles saw something and trusted him in a way nobody else in the NFL did.
Yeah.
And I think that's worth something.
I think you're spot on, Greg. And really to that point, Jay, when you look at how this offensive coordinator role has been perceived, Todd Bowles couldn't bribe anybody to take the job in 2023 because he had just won the NFC South Championship with Tom Brady with an 8-9 record and then a loss in the division, right? And then Brady retires. The only quarterback on the staff was Kyle Trask. Nobody wanted the job. They had to basically offer it to Dave Canales, who had zero play calling experience at any level except for like high school or junior college way back in the day. Mm-hmm. So it's amazing how it's gone from that where like nobody wanted it. Like Todd Monken, they wanted to hire him. He turned him down. And part of that was because the feeling around the league was that Bowles was on thin ice, right? He was the kind of the last minute replacement for Bruce Arians. March 22nd when he took the job. They didn't even have an interview process with anybody else. They anointed him as the successor. And it wasn't an attractive job. Fast forward 2 years now, Todd Bowles is a kingmaker. Mm-hmm. I mean, the sales pitch, I would say to any offensive coordinator candidate, hey, come to Tampa, coach with me for a year. I'll make you head coach. I mean, that's an attractive offer, right? Not the Buccaneer fans or Todd Bowles wants that to happen, but that's what's happened. So he's a bit of a kingmaker. Oh, and by the way, you come here, you're getting the best version of Baker Mayfield. Mike Evans, still a 1,000-yard receiver. We're going to re-sign Chris Godwin, the youngest and best offensive line. We got a 1,000-yard rookie running back. There's a lot to like about this job. It has gone from being nobody really wants a job to just the span of 2 years. I think the Buccaneers will have their pick of the lot. They will be able to really hone in on this, and I think Todd Bowles' email bin is full right about now with candidates sending their resumes in.
John Gruden's not sending his resume in. He doesn't have to send a resume in, does he?
I don't think Gruden's in play.
He probably has a file in the office.
He's got a file open there. It's funny how for certain teams, like one name always comes through every hiring cycle, and Gruden is one of those guys. Yeah. Before I let you guys go, I want to talk about the defensive side of the ball. Mm-hmm. Scott, I know we've already Larry Foote, Casey Rogers on the way out. Yeah. Talk to us about what you think about these moves, if there's going to be more guys that are going to be leaving on the defensive staff, because you and I spoke a couple of weeks ago and we said that there were changes that need to be made. I think there was a surprise that it was these two guys before anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, these are with also Rashad Johnson, the nickelbacks coach, thrown into the mix. These are the best coaches on the staff, in my opinion. And I think you look at the fact that the Tampa Bay had less than 20 takeaways as a team for the first and only time that Todd Bowles has been a coach here, going back to 2019. And at some point in time, and this just happens, the message gets lost a little bit. Like the message gets stale. And I remember when Monty Kiffin lost Herm Edwards to the Jets to be the head coaching job there. He was the Bucs defensive backs coach, Tony Dungy's assistant head coach. And then Lovie Smith was the linebackers coach, and he got tabbed by Mike Martz to become the defensive coordinator for the St. Louis Rams. Kiffin could have easily hired some of his peers, right? Another old grizzled veteran like Rod Marinelli, who kept on as his defensive line coach. Instead, he went younger, more energetic, brought some guys with enthusiasm and new ideas, tabbed Mike Tomlin from University of Cincinnati Bearcats, defensive backs coach. Joe Barry had coaching stops in Northern Arizona, UNLV, USC, and then 1 year as a quality control guy with the 49ers. And he brings these two young guys into the mix in 2001. And lo and behold, 1 year later in 2002, they're winning a Super Bowl. The Bucs interceptions had gone from 25, which, boy, Todd Bowles would love to have that number, right? 25 in 2000, and then 28 interceptions in 2001 to a franchise record 31 interceptions during the Super Bowl year, not including the playoffs. This is the regular season. And so I just remember Kiffin and Marinelli, that experience with some young blood, some fresh ideas from different ranks, not just old cronies around the league. And it made a big difference. And I think there's some coaches on the staff, outside linebackers, cornerbacks, secondary, that I think those areas underperformed. That if you're looking at Todd Bowles, can you honestly look in the mirror and say, I've got the best outside linebackers coach, the best cornerbacks coach, and the best safeties coach in the league? And if the answer is yes, then who are you kidding? If the answer is no, which we all know that it is, you better go out and try to find some upgrades, because you do that every year on your roster, and you need to do it on your coaching staff. One little point here I'll make. Look at what this offensive staff has done in 1 year. And these are, by and large, younger coaches, guys in their early 40s, late 30s, okay? Never coached in Tampa before outside of Skip Peete, who did a remarkable job as a holdover. Thad Lewis, the quarterback's coach. But two new offensive line coaches, that position leveled up. New receivers coach, that position leveled up. New tight ends coach, that position leveled up. So sometimes new, younger, more energy, different ideas can kind of challenge the status quo, shake things up, make things better. And I think we saw that on the offensive side of the ball. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, very much the same. I mean, again, you guys know this. Todd Bowles is a fiercely loyal coach.
Yeah, he is.
And he's going to stick with his guys and trust his guys because he knows them and he's worked with them. And I think it's important to say, I don't think he wants to put anybody on the street just out of a job.
Yeah.
But if, again, like he and Casey Rogers have been together 17 years, four different teams, all right, as close two coaches are going to be. But if you're Casey Rogers, again, like how many times has Casey Rogers called an NFL defense? Because he's been with Todd Bowles, and Todd Bowles calls the defense.
Yeah.
So for him, as much as he likes what he has here, likes the people he has here, likes coaching for Todd Bowles, if he has a chance to go to a really good defensive line, okay, in Detroit, one of the best in the league, even with their losses from a personnel standpoint, will be a team to beat in the NFC next year. Probably got a raise, has a chance for advancement there. I don't fault him. And for Bowles, again, we said at the end of the season, we thought there'd be change on defense, okay, and probably didn't think it was necessarily Casey Rogers right away, but I think it does him well to bring in new faces and new input and fresh voices in that room. Guys that'll challenge him, guys will say, hey, when we were here, we did this. This is something that could work here.
Right.
Instead of guys that know your system and know exactly how to communicate it and exactly how to coach it. Bowles is going to have to probably do more coaching this year in terms of getting his assistants to know what he wants, to be able to pass that along to players. But that might be a good thing. Like Scott just said, I think to look on offense and see the overhaul they had there, guys that Bowles didn't necessarily know, guys that, again, you look at Kevin Carberry, the respect we have for Kevin Carberry is an assistant offensive line coach with the Saints a year ago.
Yeah. And
they found him, they identified him, had ties to, obviously had worked with Liam, but I think they're going to do a lot to try and keep Kevin Carberry here. I think the Cucci, like you said, has some long-standing ties with Coen. He'd probably go. But I think I could easily see them giving Carberry a run game coordinator or something like that to help make sure he stays here because they love what he did with the offensive line.
Yeah.
So all of these offensive upgrades we can point to as being a function of Coen, but the people around him have helped too. So the more that they can keep the rest of this staff back and intact, personnel-wise, player-wise, they're going to be almost the same offense next year.
Yeah.
The only free agents are Godwin, who missed 10 weeks anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and Ben Bredeson, who they could probably bring back if they wanted to. So you can have this offense, in terms of how it looks on the field, look almost as close as you want to 24 next year. It's just trying to find somebody now, inside or outside, that can yield the same kind of results and the same kind of success with the same parts in a much better position than Coen was a year ago taking over this job.
Man, this has been great conversation back and forth. Greg, let us know what you got going on for Fox Sports and where everybody can find you, brother.
Yeah, just getting ready for the games this weekend. Excited to go to Mobile next week, go to New Orleans a couple days after that. So busy couple weeks ahead. This is kind of the best time of the year to be an NFL writer. So excited to be doing those things. And all the meanwhile, it's going to be tracking down offensive coordinator searches and defensive assistant coaches and all those kind of things. But again, it's a fun time to be a writer.
Scott, how about you and everything going on at pewterreport.com?
Yep, we'll be shoulder to shoulder with Greg and Mobile at the Senior Bowl with the Pewter Report staff next week. We'll have live podcasts at nighttime during the Mobile week for us there. We'll be checking out the Buccaneers do an awful lot of digging. Even though Jason Light and Todd Bowles won't be there, they'll be in front of their laptops doing Zoom interviews with offensive coordinator candidates. They haven't been to Mobile in like 2 or 3 years now because they've always had to find coordinators during this time of year, but we'll be there. And the Buccaneers have drafted guys like Tyke Smith last year. Graham Barton was supposed to be there. He pulled out with an injury. Yaya Diaby, Payne Durham, Servassier Dennis. There's a lot of guys that the Buccaneers draft from the Senior Bowl. So we'll be there covering that all week. You can find us on YouTube at Pewter Report TV. It's our YouTube channel where we do those podcasts. Then on X, Facebook, and Instagram at Pewter Report and pewterreport.com, the mothership, where we've got all these stories, including the one about the possible offensive coordinator candidates up there right now.
Great stuff, guys. Thank you so much, man. This is the highest viewership that we've had. 3 weeks. This is the final 3 weeks of the J Recher podcast. You guys have always been so supportive throughout my journey over covering all the teams here in the Tampa Bay area over the last decade. And the numbers today are just through the roof, and
That's
partially
awesome,
because
Jay.
of Liam Coen, but more importantly, because of you two heavy hitters, man, the 3 and 4 hitters that I got on the program today. So thank you guys so much for the support, your time. Have a
Absolutely.
great weekend. And yeah, we'll all be up till 2, 3 in the morning because, of course, these stories never end. Scott, Greg, thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jay.
All right, Phyllis. Wow, great stuff there. It doesn't, I mean, you can't beat it. You can't beat Greg Auman and Scott Reynolds there. I'm going to do that more often throughout the year, too. I like having the one-on-one guests, like having the talk, but like a little bit of a roundtable discussion because we have such a great fraternity of men and women here in the Tampa Bay area that cover these sports. And it's a lot of fun. And when people ask me all the time, what's the best part of your job, right? It's not the games. It's not the professional athletes. It's the people that I work with, right? It's the Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report, hopping on him and Matt Matera last night on the Pewter Report podcast. It's Greg Auman from Fox Sports. And, you know, Greg, from as long as I've known him, used to work for the Tampa Bay Times and the Athletic, and now with Fox Sports, like just a wealth of knowledge. And Buckin was all over it. Could have listened to that all day. Those guys were phenomenal. Unbelievable job. Let's see. Let's get to some of these comments. You guys did such a good job of chiming in. Nelly, way to start the show with the big guns of guests. You got that right as well. Isaiah, hopefully you heard what we were talking about with Thad Lewis. He's a guy. He's been with this team, quarterbacks coach for a while. I don't think it's hard to deny when somebody's a great coach. You kind of see it. You see it early. And listen, for the Buccaneers, I mean, they just apparently don't think that Thad Lewis would be the right guy for that offensive coordinator position, because you would think that there's a natural progression and, you're methodical moving up the ranks. You go from this position to this position to this position. I mean, Thad Lewis is 37 years young, right? You look at what he's been able to do: an intern with the Bucs in 2020, assistant wide receivers coach in 21 and 22, quarterbacks coach for the last couple of years. I mean, yeah, a heck of a career. You look at what he was able to do in the National Football League. He only played 7 games, started 6 of them, but he was with a bunch of different teams, and he was able to establish all these different relationships: Rams, Browns, Lions, Bills, Texans, Eagles, Niners, Ravens. a guy that probably has a lot of connections throughout the league, but there's something about him where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers continue to look elsewhere, when it comes to their offensive coordinator position. And I don't know. I know they interviewed him last year, and Darius is saying that. I get that. But they know him, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, they know Thad Lewis. He's been close to them for the last couple of years. And the fact that he isn't a guy that's automatically, zooming to the top of this list kind of tells you maybe that, he's not ready for it. And, maybe he won't. I don't know if he'll get that opportunity here or not. My guy, Evan Klosky from WTSP just put this out. Adam Schefter saying on Pat McAfee that Liam Coen's camp believed they were strong-armed into a deal with the Buccaneers. Also says he has never talked to the team in the past 2 decades this hot over a decision like this. Really? Strong-armed? That's what your camp thinks? I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. And Darius, I know what you're saying. Like, listen, if Thad Lewis was that guy, I get it, right? But the fact that they have had 2 opportunities now to not name him the offensive coordinator, like, I hope over time he does get that chance. But I'm talking about how you're looking at some of these coaches that have very little experience on the offensive side of the ball, and they're looking for that exact thing. They're looking for a guy with McVay, guy with Shanahan. I hope that, listen, but it says something to you, Darius, too. And I think it's a fair point, fair question. That when I asked Scott Reynolds that question, Thad Lewis isn't a guy that he brings up as a possibility, right? He talks about some of these other guys that you look at and you go, all right, well, it could be this guy with Nick Kelly with the Rams. It could be Jake Peetz, right? Tight ends guy. Are you looking solely at a Buccaneers coaching staff, right? Thad Lewis isn't on that list. Doesn't mean he's never going to be on that list, but we'll see. I hope eventually it is, because from all of I hear about Thad Lewis and just kind of saying hi and bye, just like he just seems like an awesome dude and everybody loves him. Chances of the Bucs hitting on a third good OC are very slim. Why? There's a pattern that they're doing a great job in it, and they've gotten better. Right? So, I mean, you got to believe that Liam Coen was a better option than Dave Canales, right? I think he was, without a doubt. They kept him on as QB coach of Baker. Yeah, of course. That's what I'm saying. I don't think they think he's a bad coach. I just think, like, right now, they don't think that he's an option, because I think they would have already kind of like fast tracked him. I think that would have been a no doubt. Okay, he would be the guy right after like Liam Coen would leave. So I hope he doesn't. Listen, King. I'm not saying that he's not ready. I'm just taking from what I am seeing, the way that the Buccaneers are handling this process, right? Listen, you want to give him a chance? I don't think a lot of people would be against it, because he's a young guy. He is a guy that the Buccaneers seem to like. They're moving him up through the ranks. I'm not saying there's not progression there. I'm talking about right now. It doesn't seem like the Buccaneers think that Thad Lewis is ready for that. Hey, it is what it is. I hope eventually in the long run that he is a guy that can be an offensive coordinator, and he's going to stay here for a little while. Isaiah wants to know, Super Bowl window still open? Yeah. I mean, I still think they're going to be the favorites in the division, and I'm here for it. I'm here for the offense returning, and we'll go from there. Darius Report said he was one of the front runners last season. Yeah, I know, but he didn't get the job. And I heard that same thing, Darius, but I didn't think that, or from what I heard, he was one of the guys that interviewed, but he wasn't one of the front runners for the job. So, I mean, it's neither here nor there. He's not, in my opinion, going to be a guy that they're going to look at. But if they did, and if they came out of nowhere and said, hey, we're going to get this guy, no problem. Come on now, King. I say bring Leftwich back for real. For this man had the top 5 offense for his time with us. No running game like we had now. Part of that reason was because of him that the offense became. This ain't great, bro. This ain't great, bro. I ain't got no Leftwich. Come on, man. That ain't gonna happen. So we'll go from there. And again, if Thad Lewis is a guy that gets the opportunity and he's a guy that we start hearing his name more, I mean, you're not going to get people that are going to be more plugged in than Scott Reynolds and Greg Auman. And, when you look at a guy like Rick Stroud, if it was a no doubter, like you think about all the guys that are in-house, then they would have said his name. So we'll see. Louis, could Tom Brady and the Raiders pull Chris Godwin from the Buccaneers? It was Tom Brady's favorite target here in Tampa. I just don't see how Chris Godwin leaves here. I just don't see it. I don't see how you're a guy that is coming off a second season-ending injury. You just had a kid here in the Tampa Bay area going all the way over there. You got no state income tax here. You know what the offense is going to be like with Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. He could go, but what is he going to get? And how much of that money is he going to keep, right? A lot of people are kind of looking at Chris Godwin's contract and what it could be next season. And the more and more I think people are going through it, it's going to be around 19, 20 million. He's not going to get the franchise tag because I know some people are saying, oh, we'll get the franchise. It ain't happening. He's not getting the franchise tag. Not going to happen because he's already done it twice. So that third one, it's 120% higher than I think the top 5 guys at that position. You're not paying him $38 million or whatever it is. Like, you're just not doing it. Not happening. He's going to be around 20 million. And if you're Chris Godwin, think about it. Would you rather have 20 million here in the Tampa Bay area where you're comfortable, where you know your surroundings, people care about you, or would you rather take 23, 24 million to go to some place where you know that they're not going to accentuate your strengths? It's not, I mean, there's got to be something to the comfort level. And there's going to be some buyer beware for these teams out here. There's going to be teams out there looking at Chris Godwin going, another season-ending injury? I don't know about that. Ryan wants to know, what do you think of Pete Carroll to the Raiders? I thought that was a little bit of a surprise to me. They were pretty quiet when it came to who their head coaches were going to be, but now they have John Spytek as the general manager. They have Pete Carroll as the head coach. And yeah, it's pretty wild to see Pete get back into the game, but I don't care how old he is. He has got that youthful exuberance. He wants to be back in the game. Yeah, he's a West Coast guy. I think it makes a lot of sense. Pete Carroll is one of one. There's nobody like that guy. There's other people that you may worry about his age. You might worry about being out of the game for a year, but I don't know. Pete just seems like a guy that's out there. Remember, he took his shirt off a couple of years ago when they drafted DK Metcalf. He's out there before the game throwing the football around. He is a kid. He is a kid, and he loves this freaking game. And I'm just glad he's back in it because we need personalities. We need people that love the game of football. And I'm excited. I'm excited that he's back. I think it's going to be fun. And listen, when you have a lot of strong football minds and a lot of bright, intelligent figures in one organization, good things can happen. Yeah, you can have an aspect of there's too many cooks in the kitchen. But I also think you can have a lot of guys that have really, really good ideas that you could take a franchise, you can take an organization to a level that they've never seen before. So you're looking at the ownership side with Tom Brady. You look at the front office with John Spytek, and now a head coach with Pete Carroll. I mean, the checks and balances, the communication between those three guys, I'm excited. And I'm with you, King. I was like, I think it was Tom Pelissero last night said something about John Spytek. He's agreed to a deal, and I said, Tom, with all due respect, I'll believe that when I see the paper. Tim Moore, what do you think about cutting Dean and Whitehead, saving $13 million, and signing Asante Samuel Jr.? I don't know. I think it's a really tall task. When you start playing fantasy football, cutting this guy, cutting that guy, it's all about depth. Depth is the most important thing in those positions where you're going to have a lot of movement. Linebackers, you're going to have those guys out there pretty much the entire time. When you look at guys at the secondary, when you look at the guys on the defensive line, guys that rotate in, wide receiver position, you have to make sure that you have depth. You need numbers in those situations. You can't just say, I'll get rid of this guy because, all right, yeah, you get rid of Jamel Dean, then Zion McCollum gets banged up. I mean, you saw it this year. Carlton Davis left, and you said, okay, you had Zion McCollum to be able to step up in that scenario, and then Jamel Dean misses time. Zion McCollum had a concussion. And then at the end of the playoff game, you have Josh Hayes there in the end zone playing defense for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, man, I'm not a huge fan of getting rid of players at positions where you don't have a lot of depth. So it's something to certainly be cognizant moving forward. So I know we've talked a lot about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the Glazers don't just own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They also own Manchester United. I want to bring in ESPN's Mark Ogden joining us here today on the program. Mark, thanks so much for joining us, man. I know you're a very busy guy. Been a huge fan of yours for a long time. Thanks so much for your time today.
Hi, Jay. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. And listen, it's we've had no shortage of discussions when it comes to Manchester United and the guy running it there with Ten Hag, and now we see Ruben Amorim and the job that he's doing. We're dealing with that now with the Glazers other team with the offensive coordinator with Liam Coen. But something that, and I read everything that you put out there, and every time you're on like a podcast, but something that really caught my ear was something that you said recently about how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers never host. We never see Manchester United here in the Tampa Bay area. I remember this year over at Raymond James Stadium, it was West Ham and Crystal Palace, which was it was cool, but you know, I thought it would just be a great thing. You want to grow the game here in the States, like bring Kobe Mainu over here, bring Garnacho, bring Rashford. Well, not Rashford now, but you know, bring those names over here that would help grow the game because Tampa is a pretty strong hub when it comes to soccer. Just if you can, just elaborate on the things that you've heard as far as why don't we see United here in the Bay Area?
So, as you guys will know, the Glazers have owned Man United since 2005. So 20 years this May, I think it is. So 20 years they've owned Man United. And during that time, I mean, I've been to the States several times with United on pre-season tours, and they've been to West Coast, East Coast. They've been to Texas. I've been all over the States with United, but they've never been to Tampa. And I thought it was unusual. You know, obviously Liverpool go to Boston with FSG. Arsenal have been wherever the Kroenkes have taken them with their team. So obviously you're right. It's unusual that, you know, the Glazers have used United so much to boost their commercial revenue. You would have thought that they would have taken to Tampa and really tried to cash in on the market in Florida, because obviously it's a huge state. We know that there's lots of teams in Florida right now. Into Miami's been a huge success with Messi. So they clearly know the market in Florida is a big football market, but United have never been to Tampa. So I spoke to someone at the club quite recently, and I said, look, why did they not go to Tampa? And what I was told was that it was made pretty clear that whenever this was raised in planning for pre-season tours or anything like that, that they wouldn't have got to Tampa. And it was like, why? Well, and it was put to these people that the Glazers made it clear to the club. Listen, I'm not saying Joe Glazer told whoever the manager was at the time, but the message was that the Glazers don't want to take United to Tampa because they've got a great training facility. In particular, the players at United would see that and think, why don't we have that in Manchester? Why is our training facility not been updated pretty much since 1999 when they moved in? It's had a couple of upgrades, but not really had much love. Now, I know there are kind of nuances in the ownership situation in the US in terms of how things are built. You know, the stadiums are built, and often public money is used to build the stadiums, training ground. I understand that, but the point being made was that the Man United players who play for one of the most income revenue generating clubs in the world would have been unhappy at the superior quality facility at Tampa that they have compared to Man United. So they've not been to Tampa or anywhere close to Tampa. I don't even think they've been to Florida, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, you're right, because I would definitely have traveled to go see them. And when the whole thing with the European Super League came out, I was on air at the time, and it was such a honey spot that there wasn't really anything going else on in sports. So I was able to really dive into that whole thing and saying, I compared it to college football. Imagine if these two teams joined up with this two team in a conference and got together. That was like United and Liverpool joining up with Madrid and Barcelona and saying, hey, we're going to do our own thing. But Mark, I was at Old Trafford for a couple of games last year, the first two games after Sir Bobby Charlton passed away. And me and my girlfriend went, and she walked up and she even gave the look like, this is amazing because of the history, but it's not amazing because it's not like world-class facilities. And you're right, Mark, you're spot on, because not only do the Buccaneers have an incredible facility, but they just built an indoor practice facility when there's inclement weather. And I always thought it was very unique as far as the relationship, the opposition fans chanting USA because of the Glazers. I don't know if it's ever going to change. Like, we were a little nervous, like on the train, letting people know that we were from the States. But I mean, I don't think that'll ever change. Even now with Jim Ratcliffe there, people don't look at the Glazers very fondly over there. And I don't think it'll ever change. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, it's pretty good that he didn't turn it with a kind of half and half Man United Tampa Bay Bucks scarf. That wouldn't have been a wise move. Look, it all dates back to the way that the club was bought by the Glazers. So prior to 2005, United were a publicly owned company. Anyone could buy it. There were shares listed on the stock exchange, but they were the biggest and best football club in the world. They had no debt whatsoever, and the Glazers bought the club by borrowing against the ground. So automatically overnight, United were plunged into debt to about £700 million in debt. So having been debt free overnight, it was so basically it's hard to The best way to describe it is Man United are paying for the privilege of having the Glazers the owners. So the Glazers invested £200 million of their own money, and they borrowed the other £500 million. So over the years, that has obviously been paid back, and I think a lot of the siblings earned maybe £1 billion or close to £1 billion each if they'd sold the club outright last year. So the profit they've made on United is huge, and they haven't invested a penny into the team. They've taken money out in terms of dividends and consultancy fees. The figures I've seen over the years, they've taken over £1 billion out, and what makes that even more difficult for Man United fans to accept is that across the road at Man City, Sheikh Mansour's put maybe £2 billion in. So United have had that issue. They've had this kind of the drag of having the Glazers owners, because the biggest and best football club in the world has basically been used by the Glazers as an ATM machine, a cash machine, just to draw down the money. And I don't know if this is right. I don't know if the Glazers have used the United money to help fund the Bucs. I'm not sure it is right. I think it's a different kind of funding stream, but still, that is the accusation. And for United fans, they can say, well, we see no evidence that they're putting the money into Manchester United, so that's why they're so unpopular, which is why, you might see a little bit of a link between, the Red Sox and Liverpool, or, the LA Rams and Arsenal. You might see a bit of a crossover. And even behind the scenes at United, I've been told that, at those clubs at Liverpool and at Arsenal, there is a crossover between the management teams at all the clubs that are in that group. There's absolutely no commercial tie-ups or crossover between United and the Bucs, because in many ways the Bucs are toxic to any Man United fan. They are the Glazers. So I don't quite know what the Bucs fans think about the Glazers. I don't think about Man United, but certainly in Manchester, well, unless you're a Man City fan, there's no popularity for the Glazers.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to have Rebecca Lowe on a couple of years ago, and we had a conversation, Mark, and she was like, Jay, I don't understand about the Bucs and the relationship with the Glazers, because here it's kind of like, hey, as long as they win a Super Bowl, they don't really care. And they look at it, and I think, even for even more of an amateur view of it, of what do you mean they don't spend money? They signed, player X, player, signed Ugarte, they signed all these different guys in the last couple of years. What do you say to those people that say, hey, they have money to buy players? It's not like they can't buy players. Is that a different, and excuse me for my naivete about it, but, is that just a different revenue stream altogether where, yeah, they're in debt, they're taking out dividends, but they're still buying players? Like, how does that whole thing kind of work out?
Yeah, so the money that Man United generate, either through tickets at the stadium on match day or through television money. So the TV deal with the Premier League is obviously huge. They make money off that. And in the good old days when they were winning Premier Leagues and doing really well in the Champions League, they would get prize money and do well. Big. That was a big earner. But that's dropped off in recent years, so they don't have the same amount of money coming in. So the revenue streams have always been strong. And the Glazer supporters within the club would say, look, when Man United were taken over by the Glazers, the United weren't making as much money commercially as they should have. They were underperforming as a brand. The Glazers transformed the club as a brand, and for a good 4 or 5 years, they led the way. The way that they, sliced and diced United's brand and badge and sold it all over the world. There were, tractor sponsors in Thailand and potato chip partners in Vietnam. They would sell the badge everywhere and anywhere. But everyone else is doing that now. Everyone's caught up. So for a while, they were making Man United more and more successful off the pitch, and that was helping sustain the Ferguson success on the pitch. But what's happened since is that Ferguson left, Sir Alex Ferguson, the manager. They didn't have the sporting knowledge, the football knowledge to run the club without him. Mistakes have made, and yes, they spent a lot of money on players. The money they spent is what the club has generated. It's not, they haven't put their hands in the pocket and said, there you go, we need to, help move things along here. So the money's been from the club's generated. But in many ways, over the last 20 years, each of the last 20 years, United have been £50 to £70 million down every year. Now that money is one very good player, one excellent player every year, but it's gone, paying for the Glazers, paying for their dividends, paying for the interest on the debt. So that's the point of the Man United fans having to pay for the privilege of having the Glazers as the owners, that they're seeing money go out of the club time and time again. If United had £70 million each year for the last 20 years to sign a player, they would be where they should be in the eyes of the fans right now, right at the very top. But they haven't done, and the stadium has become a relic. When the Glazers arrived, it was the best stadium in England, probably one of the best in Europe, but it hasn't really been touched apart from a lick of paint in the years since. So the stadium has been left to rot and ruin. The team has been left to decline. The training grounds have been left to decline, which is why the fans were so happy when they heard the Glazers might sell a couple of years ago. But obviously, they didn't sell. They sold some of the money. They've taken a back seat and let Jim Ratcliffe and his Ineos group take charge of football operations. But the Glazers still own the majority share. I think they own 53% of the club. So they ultimately have the final say in what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you compare Carrington to what we have here at the Buccaneers training facility, which is right across the way from the stadium. It's like it's honestly night and day. What impact have you seen with Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Rada and Brailsford and all those guys? I mean, they sit together at these games. They're they bring it in, but I'm also seeing, and you're reporting on this kind of stuff where they're cutting these wages for the legends and Sir Alex and the Christmas bonuses and things like that. Is that a byproduct of what has happened with the Glazers? Are they trying to kind of rationalize that type of stuff because of all the money that they're in debt of?
Pretty much, they've arrived and looked at the books and thinking, there's so much money going out of the club here. So last September they posted their financial accounts for that year, for the year ending 2024, end of May 2024, and they'd lost £113 million. They posted losses of £113 million, which it's really hard to get your head around considering how much money Manchester United make. So they felt that the wage bill was too big, the staff levels were too big. They did have a bloated staff in many ways. So some things that had to be done, but obviously quite emotive. If you stop Sir Alex Ferguson's pay as an ambassador, that is quite an emotive thing to do. But you could argue that was a mistake of the Glazers. When Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013, he was given an ambassador role by the Glazers at £2 million a year. So over the last 10, 12 years, Ferguson's earned more than £20 million to basically sit in the director's box and wave at people. So that was a mistake of the Glazers. So some of the things that Ineos have done has been overdue, but it's the emotion of it. And it's also the kind of the ruthlessness and the kind of the way that they've laid people off. 250 people went last time. A lot of those people were laid off for no other reason that their face didn't fit because they were doing good jobs, but they were cut ruthlessly. Now, in terms of what difference have they made, I was told when they finally got the keys to the club in many ways that it'll get worse before it gets better, and that has pretty much been the case. This United team is the worst of the Premier League era by a long way. 1992, the Premier League started. They've never finished outside the top 10. I think they're now 13th or 14th, maybe even 15th. This is the worst Man United team for maybe 50 years, and they were relegated in 1974. So that's how bad they are. And it's because it's just over the years of the Glazer neglect on and off the pitch. It's at the point where they're now reaping the whirlwind of that. That the players haven't been good enough. They've wasted money on players. They've panicked and signed players for too much money. Old players that weren't worth it. Now, obviously, when the Bucs signed Tom Brady, that was hit the jackpot. They won the Super Bowl, and they kind of tried to repeat that trick with Cristiano Ronaldo. Yep. Now, Tom Brady won the Super Bowl with the Bucs. Cristiano Ronaldo was basically kicked out to Saudi Arabia within 18 months because he made the team worse.
Right.
So, that's what I said about the lack of knowledge. Too many times we're kind of blinded by the name, and that's great for the club's revenue, the commercial, funding that you can get. So it's going to take a long time to turn it around. But yes, Ineos are paying for the problems and the failures of the Glazer regime, and it could take a long time to get right. I mean, if ever, since United was successful, so many clubs have come along and copied their formula. Man City, PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and taken it to another level. Liverpool. So United all of a sudden they used to have to field the field to themselves pretty much, and now they don't. They're not even in the field, so that's the problem.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think the Champions League is going on and they're playing in a Europa League game on Thursday against Rangers. And Mark, we've heard it for the last couple of years. I mean, Ralph Rangnick was coming in saying that it was open heart surgery, and everybody was like, I don't know if I believe this guy. And now you see even Ruben Amorim saying like, yeah, this is a thing. The storm is coming. So like people see that there's issues here. And I want to ask you before I let you go about the transfer window here, because I know Ruben wants to probably bring more guys in. I know they've been linked with the left wing back there to try to change that aspect of his game plan. But what's the deal with Rashford? What's the deal with Garnacho? Because these are two guys. I mean, it sucks. The way you think you would come out of this is building through the academy, these young players like Menu, like Garnacho, like Rashford, and to think that two of the three of those guys could be out by the end of this month. I mean, that doesn't feel good for a supporter of a team that's going to be in 13th place by the end of the day.
So obviously United are famous globally for producing their own players. There's a record that it dates back over 80 years. Every game that United have played for the last 80 years, they've had at least one homegrown player in the squad. And that's crazy to think that goes back predates the Second World War. So they're a club with a proud tradition of the Busby Babes, the class of '92, David Beckham, people like that. So that's what United have been built on over the years. But nowadays, well, certainly in the recent years, the Premier League has operated these what they call PSR rules, profit and sustainability rules. So clubs are only allowed to lose £150 million over a 3-year period, or they get points deductions. Now, United, for whatever reason, despite losing £113 million last year, were able to get around that because of money invested in capital, construction projects. So the point is that when a homegrown player is sold, all of that money that they receive is regarded as profit on the balance sheet because they haven't had to spend to bring that player in. So it develops basically an asset. So if Garnacho is sold for £40 million this month, that £40 million goes straight into the pot to spend. They can spend that without any penalty. If they sold, for instance, Casemiro, because they signed Casemiro from Real Madrid, any money they get from him would have to be kind of put on the balance sheet and worked it off against how much he's owed to Real Madrid and all this. So that's why selling homegrown players is such a big deal. Why Chelsea have done it over the last year. Why Man City have done it with Cole Palmer, players like that. Yeah. The money that comes in is basically free money to spend. So if Garnacho goes for £40 million, that would enable United to go out straight away and sign maybe 2 players, a defender and a forward, perhaps. And that is absolutely massive right now. The calculation is, do they wait 2 or 3 years for Garnacho to realise his potential and become a world beater? Or do they think, he might not become a world beater. Let's cash in now and get priorities solved right now because they are in a bad place. So getting rid of Garnacho for money might make United better, quicker. Rashford is not going to be sold. Nobody can afford his fee or his wages. But if Rashford is loaned out to, say, Barcelona, which is possible, surprisingly, they would save on his wages. So if they had a deal with Barca whereby Barca paid half his wages, then that would put United back in, maybe £150,000 a week on the payroll. Again, that money would help pay for somebody's wages. So it's a financial calculation right now, and that's why people like Rashford and Garnacho are available, because it helps accelerate United getting to where they need to be. But the problem is, over the last 10 years, as we know, there's not been many clubs worse than Man United in terms of recruiting players. They've made some big mistakes. So if they get £50 million in the pot this month, do you trust them to spend it wisely? Or is it just going to be another Anthony, another Rasmus Højlund, another Joshua Zirkzee? Do you trust the guys to spend the money wisely? That is the big question.
Yeah, it's funny. Anthony in the squad yesterday, and he's already on the plane to Sevilla to go play for Real. But last one before I let you go. What do you think is going to take for them to even get back into Champions League contention? Is it just recruitment? Is it going out and getting the right players? Is it getting players out? Do you believe that Ruben Amorim is the right guy to be able to kind of at least get them moving in the right direction?
I do think Amorim's the right guy. I think he's saying a lot of home truths, a lot of uncomfortable truths that people needed to hear but probably didn't want to. And he's realised, or he's identified, that the squad is pretty much not fit for purpose, and there's lots of players that aren't good enough. So in football, it's hard to get rid of people at the same time, though. But, contracts and fees, it's difficult. So he needs to be backed by the owners. It's going to take a long time. They have to be a lot smarter when it comes to bringing people in, because they've basically overspent on poor players, and they've overspent on players that have had their career. Casemiro, Rafael Varane, Ronaldo, Bastian Schweinsteiger, all these players. So they need to be smarter. They can't get back to where they want to be without being smart. But I think Amorim is a smart appointment. I think he's a guy that's got certainly ambition. He's got a plan, but it won't be quick. And it's whether Ineos, the owners, and the fans have got the patience. But I think the fans have got the patience, but whether the owners have got the patience, that's another matter.
You got that right. You mentioned Bastian Schweinsteiger. That guy didn't play long for Man U, but he loves repping them on social media. He's always tweeting about Manchester United. I'm like, damn, bro, you weren't here that long, but he loves supporting the Red Devils. Mark Ogden, senior writer for ESPN. And I'm telling everybody that's tuned in today in the Tampa Bay area, one of the most talented writers in any sport around the world. Follow him, all social media platforms, especially on Twitter/X, Mark Ogden _ everything going on with ESPN, with soccer, with Man U. Mark is the guy that I go to every single time. Mark, this is an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you again soon, buddy.
Thanks, Jay. No problem.
You got it. Great stuff there, man. And that's part of the thing here on the J Recher podcast, what I've been doing here in the Tampa Bay area. You see the scars behind me, Rowdies, Tampa Bay Sun, Manchester United, trying to give you guys an insight, what we can do to grow the game of soccer here in this country. And that is the way to do it. And you got to be able to kind of bring in different aspects of the game to try to make it familiar to you. It's the most popular sport in the world. And we have a great link here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the Glazers owning both squads. But I know a lot of the talk today is about Liam Coen and the Buccaneers. So let's get back to the football talk. Let's see. Let's get to some of these texts. If you have an opinion on Liam Coen and the decision for him to go from the Buccaneers to the Jaguars, let me know. Put it there at the bottom of the screen. Kill that like button for you. Like and subscribe. And we'll talk about it right now. Jamal St. is going to join us at 1:30 from Jacksonville. Come on in, man. Come on in. Let's talk to Jamal. Let's see what he has to say. Russell, Hammer, great show day interviews as always. Let's see. Keep going. Yeah. Nick, Premier League NFL crossover we've been waiting for. Our guy Scott Clitheroe, you saw your team. Come on, man. This is how we roll. You know, we get a little bit of everything, and it's a good palate cleanser. We're going to get back to the Liam Coen conversation right now, talking all things Bucks. We talk a little soccer there, but not just soccer, the business aspect of it as well. What are the chances we can get a Khalil Mack or Joey Bosa in free agency? Khalil Mack is a possibility, in my opinion. Guys, I said this earlier this week, and I'll say it again. We don't need a guy like Khalil Mack. I'm sorry. He's 34 years old. He's 34 years old. He had 6 sacks last year. He was playing opposite of Joey Bosa. He was playing with a bunch of other good players on that Los Angeles Chargers defense, and he only had 6 sacks. Do not become one of those teams. I was going to bring this up before the whole Liam Coen thing came out earlier this year. The one thing you have to keep in mind when you're a fan of a professional sports team is you don't want to become this kind of team. You don't want to become a team like this team right here. We just had Mark Ogden join us. You don't want to bring in players that are past their prime, and the only reason why you're bringing them in is because you know their name. It's not about nobody looked at the Shaq Barrett signing a couple years ago and went, wow, Shaq Barrett, man, everybody's on. That guy's going to be a beast. Nobody said that. He wasn't getting the opportunities because he was behind the DeMarcus Wares and the Von Millers and who else was there? Shane Rays of the world. He was the 4th best guy there. He comes to Tampa, he's able to flourish. Don't get yourself in a position like Manchester United. Don't do that, where you're bringing in these guys that are in their early 30s, mid 30s, and you're like, hey, we want to bring in that guy because I know his name. Don't do that. Don't become that team. Khalil Mack is 34 years old. He had 6 sacks last year. That is not the type of guy you want here when a team needs an elite pass rusher. They don't need a good pass rusher. They don't need just a guy that's going to be giving a wealth of experience and knowledge to these guys. They need a badass. They need elite. Pat brings it here. What's the chances of trading for Max Crosby? I've been saying that all week long. The Buccaneers need to do whatever it takes to go get Max Crosby. Now. He needs it now. Go get Max Crosby. And I just saw something on the 33rd team the other day, and it was a trade scenario, a trade possibility for the Green Bay Packers to go get Max Crosby. Listen to this deal. This is what I've been talking about all week long. You got to go get Max Crosby if this is the cost. And, of course, they tweeted out 9 million things today. Okay? But the deal was a 2nd-round pick this year and a 3rd-round pick next year. Here it is, right here. The idea from the 33rd team, and we know who's part of that, our guys Sam Munson, Steve Palazzolo. The trade pitch from the 33rd team was the Green Bay Packers receive Max Crosby, and they trade to the Raiders a 2nd-round pick in 2025 and a 3rd-round pick in 2026. That's it. Remember, there was people earlier this week telling me that Max Crosby was going to cost 2 first-round picks. No, sir. Crosby's going to cost a first-round pick and Jamel Dean, or a first-round pick and Rachaad White. No, sir. That doesn't happen in the National Football League. Every single trade is not a Herschel Walker type trade. Not a happen. No. Go get Max Crosby. If you're telling me that it's a 2nd-round pick in 25 and a 3rd-round pick in 26, Jason, take my phone. Call them. Call them right now and bring that man in here. He's 27 years old, who can rush the passer, who can play the run, who, even though his team sucks, he is not going to give in. That is the type of guy that you want with the Buccaneers the next 5 years. Give me Yaya on one side. Give me Max on the other side. Chris Braswell backing them up. Then you start drafting some of these young pass rushers and get them in. Now you've got 4, 5, 6 guys. But you have your A. You have your talisman. You have your number 9. You have your guy that is going to be the man that every single year is going to get you 10 sacks. Look at his stats. Let's look him up together. You guys have seen him. And he plays with that. He's got a little bit of a dick to him. I like it. He's that guy that is like, he doesn't care. He's pissing off Patrick Mahomes. Give me that guy. I don't want a guy that's out there trying to make friends with people. He had 7.5 sacks this year. 28 solo tackles. He broke up 5 passes. Look at the last couple of years. Ever since he joined the league, 10 sacks, 7 sacks, 8 sacks, 12.5, 14.5, 7.5. And up until this year, he played in every single game, so he's there. He's durable. Obviously, he wasn't 100% this year. He missed 5 games. He still had 7.5 sacks. The thing that stands out to me is before this season, he had 90 and 89 tackles. You don't see that from pass rushers. You don't see that. You see a lot of guys go out there and either they can rush the passer and get to him, pressures, sacks, knockdowns, or they don't do anything. And you look at their stats at the end of the year, and you'll have a JTS type of stat line. 4 or 5 sacks and 25 tackles in 17 games. Sorry, bro. That ain't cutting it. That ain't cutting it. King Cook asking, what do I think about Chase Young? Chase Young is another guy. He's just another guy. And yeah, when he was the number 2 overall pick from the Washington then Redskins, you're like, dude, this guy he can't miss coming out of Ohio State. He looked like a beast, especially after seeing what Myles Garrett was able to do. You're like, I'm not betting against this guy. Chase Young in his career in 5 seasons hasn't had 1 season over 7.5 sacks. He also isn't all that healthy. This was the first year he played every single game for his team. When he played, actually he played every game last year. Well, he played 16 and 17 because he got traded to the Niners at the deadline. Okay. But this was the first year he played everything. 17 games for the Saints. He had 5.5 sacks. That's the guy you want? Listen, if the Buccaneers had a great coach on the outside that was able to develop young pass rushers and get the most out of them, we'd have a different conversation. You'd be able to look at it and go, okay, well, he only got 5.5 here, but put him in this offense, or put him in this defense, he might get 8.5, 9, 10, 11. That's not the way it's been for the Buccaneers. You haven't had that great coaching on the outside at the outside linebacker position. You need somebody established. You want Josh Sweat? Okay, that's another guy. Josh Sweat may be a little bit more of a reasonable acquisition for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 27 years old, like the age, of course. But let's look at his sack totals. Okay, looking at the last couple of seasons, he had 11 a couple of years ago for the Eagles, then 6.5, then 8. Good player, also durable, great player. That's what I'm saying. You could get a Josh Sweat, fine. But is he going to be better than Yaya Diaby? Maybe. Incrementally, yes. I want a home run. I want a grand slam. I want a guy like Max Crosby that's a game changer, where it makes people turn their heads and go, wow, Buccaneers got considerably better on the defensive side of the ball. And listen, that's a position of need. You need guys that can rush the passer. Because JTS ain't coming back. You don't know what you have from Chris Braswell because you didn't see from Chris Braswell this year what you saw from Yaya Diaby last year, where Yaya was pushing, and he pushed JTS right out of that starting spot. And he was on one side, and what was it? He was on one side. You had Anthony Nelson. You had Shaq Barrett on the other side. You didn't get that this year. Chris Braswell wasn't pushing anybody. This was a second-round pick out of Alabama that people had high hopes for, and unfortunately, he did not rise to the occasion. Now, does that mean that his career is set in stone? He's not going to be a good player? Not by any means. But I think with young pass rushers at times, you're able to see it very early, especially by the end of the season. Again, case in point, you saw it from Yaya Diaby 2 years ago. But by the end of the year, you could not have him on the sidelines to start the game. You knew he was considerably better than Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. Wonder what happens to JTS. Where does he go? Where does he go The Giants got a guy, Colts got a guy that'll be free agent. I mean, Azeez Ojulari, that's another guy that you're probably talking about when it comes to the Giants. You know, they were still looking for, with as many good players they have, going out and getting Brian Burns, drafting Kayvon Thibodeau, having one of the best interior defensive linemen in the game with Dexter Lawrence. Like, their pass rush wasn't blowing anybody away either. All right, we've been talking a lot about this Liam Coen situation from the Tampa side. Let's go to the Jacksonville side. My guy, Jamal St, WJXT up there in Jacksonville. Jamal and I were going back and forth the last week or so, telling Jamal that Liam Coen was allergic to cats and they didn't have medicine. Bro, we had fun.
We did. Come on. Look, it had to be Liam. It had to be. Look, I guess a couple of years ago, the catchphrase for the Jaguars was, it was always the Jags. Well, it was always Liam. There was no, once Ben Johnson was gone for the Jaguars, this is what it had to be. It was one or the other. Ben went off the board. It had to be. So they had to do what they had to do. You know, look, allergic to cats, whatever. They'll find some medicine for him. They'll figure it out. You know,
they got the pharmacy. They got the CVS and the Walgreens up there in Jacksonville. But yeah, I mean, before we get to the Liam thing, when Liam announced, where it was announced that Liam was staying with the Buccaneers, what was that feeling like for you and everybody up in Jacksonville, knowing like, dang, we didn't get Ben, we didn't get Liam, are we really going to be looking at Patrick Graham and Robert Saleh? Like, what was the thought process when it looked like Liam Coen was going to stay in Tampa?
The problem is, like, this has been what it's like. With Trent Baalke, the last coaching search was similar enough to that, where it dragged on. It really felt like Doug Peterson was the constellation prize. Like, he was the first guy to interview, and then he ends up being the guy they hired. I mean, you interviewed all these people in between, people that didn't necessarily want it, and they've fought this battle for, I mean, I guess at least 3 coaching cycles now. Actually, outside of Urban Meyer, I mean, when they had Doug Marrone, the Jaguars weren't a sought-after job, and they were struggling to get people. And then now, for a different reason, you know, because of this general manager that, for whatever reason, his reputation around the league, people don't necessarily want to work with him. And head coaches know it's hard to get a second shot. I mean, so they're not trying to set themselves up for failure. And look, we can talk about Trent's reputation, whatever it may be, but I mean, the man was a survivor. So you came in, and if it was you or him, he was going to survive. so I get it. You know, look, I get it. You're thinking like, man, this guy's going to get me fired. This guy's going to get me fired, and you're never going to get another shot. So when it goes off the rails like that, it was just mismanagement. And honestly, it had been a calling card of some of the stuff we've seen from this franchise in the past. I mean, you look at it, and it shouldn't have surprised me. They hadn't fulfilled the Rooney Rule, so they couldn't make Ben Johnson the offer on Monday. And the Bears played it well. You know, I remember it was during that Lions game. The Commanders were in the fourth quarter. They had a lead. Everybody was kind of settling in that the Commanders were probably going to win this thing. And then I remember it was one of the NFL Insider guys. It pushes through my phone, and it's Eddie George going to interview for Bears head coaching job. And I'm like, Eddie George? I'm like, what is he doing? I said, has he been doing a good job at Tennessee State? Like, I knew he was there. And then I'm like, and then they offer Ben Johnson the next morning. And I said, damn it, that was the Rooney Rule. That was their Rooney Rule interview. And the Jaguars had only interviewed Robert Saleh in person, so they hadn't fulfilled it. So they couldn't even make an offer. So he was off the board, which meant you had to go get Liam Coen. You had to go. They had to take your guy. I mean, there was no way around it. And I mean, it didn't go pretty at first, right?
I want to get into that, but I want to ask you about the Rooney Rule real quick, because I had my buddy Nick Cattles on from New England. They interviewed who was
Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich.
And I'm looking at that, and I'm like, what the I mean, Byron was literally offering his services to Notre Dame, and Marcus Freeman's like, we're good. I listen, I like the spirit of the Rooney Rule, but I think, Jamal, you and I can agree, this isn't the reason why. I mean, this is not the way that you're trying to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity, because now it's almost just like, see, we did it. Like, that's not the point. That's not the point of the Rooney Rule. And I hate that. I hate watching that kind of stuff, because now you look at it like the same thing you did with your phone with Eddie George, the same thing I did with Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton. I'm like, That's why we're doing the Rooney Rule, to satisfy just things like this. So you can have these fake ass interviews just to make sure like, hey, you satisfied. That's not the point, man. That's
You're
not
wasting
the point of the
people's
rule.
time.
Yeah, and it's to me,
It's an insult.
It is. It's insulting. Not insulting to me. I maybe you're insulting my intelligence, but just but it's like, come on, man. I was born during the day, but it wasn't yesterday. And I understand the spirit, but you can't tell me the Rooney family that have been fighting for inclusion the entire time that they've been a part of the National Football League, they're looking at things like this, like, yeah, we should just let this go. That's got to change.
Right.
Has to change.
I don't know what the solution is, but this is not working. Teams have manipulated it at this point. I mean, you mentioned the New England Patriots. I mean, even their social media team didn't even give each guy their own graphic. They put them on the same damn graphic. You couldn't even split it into two to make them feel better. But I mean, like,
brother can't get his own graphic. Shit.
I mean, come on, help me out here.
You're right.
But they did, and like neither one of those were serious in contention guys. And I mean, people were giving the Jaguars some grief for Patrick Graham interviewing yesterday early, and then them moving on Liam Coen late. But I mean, again, that's the rule. And there were some people, they do like Patrick Graham. It wasn't like he was completely like Shad Khan is a lot. It runs a very wide open search. If Patrick Graham would have gone in there and knocked their socks off, he 100% could have been convinced. 100%. And that was the thing the last go around. I mean, they run this exhaustive search almost to the point where you liked somebody, but you wanted to make sure you talk to everybody, and you'll end up losing out on the guys you like. It has been the process in the past. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution for the Rooney Rule is, but I do know what they're doing right now is not working, and it has to change.
I think Jay and Jamal sounds like the perfect group. We should get together, take it to the league. Never know, man. We could be millionaires for this.
Hey, come on now.
All right, so take us through. Oh, and some breaking news. It looks like the Houston Texans just let go of Bobby Slowick, their offensive coordinator.
Man, I saw that a minute ago. I was looking at my phone and I was like, "What is going on?" He was getting head coaching interviews last year, and then now. It's like, come on.
I know. So you look at both sides, right? Like you could do what Ben Johnson did, like, hey, it worked out. And then you look at Bobby Slowick did, was like, take any job, right? Like it's so crazy how all these offense coordinators are handling it differently. And obviously we see it here in Tampa Bay with Dave Canales and now Liam Coen. When did you start either hearing, when did you start believing that the door was back open for Liam to possibly take this job?
When they moved on from Trent on Wednesday afternoon. So Wednesday was a crazy day. Crazy. So the stuff comes out about Liam Coen opting out of the interview early. So I think I got up. I was like, all right, well, let me get on into work. We got to work on this. All right. So start knocking some stuff out. This is, whatever. And we throw it out there. And then about 20 minutes after I'd written this column, ripping the franchise, Trent Baalke's unemployed. I'm like, well, this just changed things. So then they move on from Trent. Before the end of the night, I think I was kind of trying to like quietly say I don't think people were catching on because I don't like to do the spill the tea, scoop stuff. Right. Whatever. Yeah, I'm not that guy. I don't want to do that. But Liam was the guy, and they were going to make the home run push for Liam. Was it always a long shot because you had to kind of reel them back in? Sure, but it's tough to tell a billionaire no. So, and Shad Khan ended up saying, look, you're going to have to tell me no. And that was always the plan when they moved, by that night, that they were going to make this push back at Liam Coen. And ultimately they did. And then that next day, I mean, stuff got messier. I mean, all the reports from he's in Jacksonville to Tampa Bay can't get in touch with him. He's not responding to the phone calls. I think Rick Stroud or someone in Tampa had originally said that Penn hadn't been put to paper on the contract. And I was like, if that ain't a message, I don't know what it is.
Right.
So, they couldn't get in touch with him. He's here. Oh, wait, Todd Bowles talked to him. They know he's in Jacksonville. That there was just no going back. There was no going back, and the Jaguars didn't want to go back. This was where it was headed. Shad Khan, as almost clearly as he possibly could without directly saying it, told us in his end of season press conference that he thought the Jaguars were predictable and basically told us he wanted a young offensive play calling head coach. They had to go get that guy.
Yeah.
And that's where it came down to. And once you struck out on one, Liam Coen was the other option.
Yeah, you got that right. And yeah, I think going back, and if you read Albert Breer's article of like the hour by hour what happened with this whole thing, it's like the saga, man. It's like Days of Our. It's a brand new soap opera between the Liam Coen Buccaneer days and the Jaguar days. Do you think if Trent Baalke was fired before Ben Johnson took the job with the Bears, that he would be the coach of the Jaguars today?
That's an interesting question. And I don't know the answer to that. I do know they liked both. I know they loved Liam's first interview.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if they had their pick between the two where they would have gone. I think that the conversations would have been vastly different with Ben if Trent wasn't there and if they were in a little bit of a different position. So I don't know. I think they would have made a strong push for Ben.
Yeah.
And I think there would have been some people on Ben's side of it that are in his ear saying, hey, go to Jacksonville because, we want to be in Jacksonville with you. So it definitely would have been an interesting thing, but that just didn't come together.
How did the whole Baalke thing? Because last time you and I spoke, it was just like it was no secret. I mean, he was on the call with Shad Khan, and he's like, "Yeah, we'll have the conversation if a coach comes in and he doesn't like this guy." Like, it's just those are the candor that Shad Khan had was only candor that you have if you're a billionaire. You're like, yeah, I write the check. Like, I sign the check. That's it. Like, I don't have to worry about people being offended because at the end of the day, my name is at the bottom right corner of this check. But how did it go from, oh, well, Baalke's going to be part of this whole process, but, oh, wow, Liam Coen doesn't want any part of this. We got to make a change.
The interesting thing is Trent has always maintained that if he felt like he was the problem, he'd step aside. So I guess the way they phrased it was a parting of ways. And I there's a part of me that wonders is if somebody finally, with people openly saying, it's just him. I just don't want to work with him. I like Jacksonville. I like Trevor Lawrence, but I can't come here with him. And if you hear that enough times where it finally convinced him or convinced Shad enough to say, okay, look, dude, you're the problem. We got to do this. Look, I think Trent did some good things during his time in Jacksonville. I think he did a lot of things that they wish they could do over. There's some contracts he handed out in free agency that were awful. But ultimately it was that it just looks like these coaches didn't want to work with him. For one reason or another, he has a reputation that has made its way around the league. It is a small league, and there are things that he's done in the building here in Jacksonville that, look, ain't great. So he's not the easiest of guys to work with, and he's a guy that, again, when you're the guy, the coach gets fired and you keep surviving, right or wrong, there's a target on your back. Well, why do you keep getting the pass?
Yeah, because you're part of the decision-making process. Why are you still here? So, yeah, you're right. I look at that situation going, okay. I mean, eventually he had to start looking around, and I'm sure that word gets around of, hey, the situation, because you got the quarterback, you got an owner, and you've told us here on the podcast before, like, Shad's like, all right, what do you need? What do you need? I'll sign the check, right? So it's like you got ownership that's not going to meddle, but he's going to put his pen to paper and give you all these different things. You got a franchise quarterback. You have some pieces. You got a Brian Thomas Jr. It's like a lot worse scenarios out there you could have, So, yeah, it makes sense that Trent Baalke was kind of the only, thing that at the end people were looking at like, all right, you got to get moving. Any hesitation, any trepidation from you and it's tough to speak for everybody in Jacksonville, but with the way that Liam Coen handled his business by not being upfront because of how he was a little bit shady when it came to like not picking up the phone for 6 hours and saying, hey, Todd Bowles, I'm thinking about this. And then there was word that somebody in the Jacksonville office told somebody in the Bucs office that he's already here. So any worry about that he is a guy that has bounced to 8 different places in 8 years now, and his word may not be bond, and that could hurt him when it comes to building a staff and also being a leader of a football team?
Look, I don't think it's a thing of where like he's not trustworthy, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there that are probably listening to this that at some point have called in sick to their job when they weren't actually sick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a similar enough thing. Hey, hey, did I see you on TV at that Buccaneers game and you said you were at home sick? And you're like, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. You know, but I think people have done that before. Right? And this represented a step up. While his short stints as offensive coordinator places does give me pause because he was just the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay for a single season. Before that, he was calling plays in Kentucky for 1 year. Then before that, he was calling plays, or not calling plays. He was the offensive coordinator for Sean McVay and the Rams for a year. Then before that, he was calling plays in Kentucky for just a year. So like these 1 year stints as offensive coordinator, sure, that is definitely a little bit of a red flag for me. But I love the fact that there was the conversations within Tampa about, look, we have to keep this guy. We love this guy and what he did. I love the fact that he's from a football coaching family. I mean, talking about that, like you learn things from growing up about how to lead a group from watching dad, because he was a coach to some extent. So I like those things. So no, I don't have a pause with the way it went down. Like overall, his resume has been trying to take steps up. It hasn't been like he just jumped ship for a lateral move. Like, I don't want to be on this coaching staff, so I'm going to go over here and take the same job. It's been promotions. I mean, the only one that might be seen as not a promotion was going from the Rams to Kentucky, but that was that year where Sean McVay was kind of talking about whether he should retire or not and told all his assistants to go look for another job. And Liam Coen just said, okay, I got one, and left. And it turns out Sean stayed, but if your boss tells you, hey, look, ain't no guarantees around here, you're going to start looking too.
Yes, you're right. I'm with you 100%. And it's interesting to see how that whole thing is going to shake out, whether, that has anything to do with what happens in the 2025 season. Because I've said this before. Listen, you may not like the way Liam Coen handled his business, but if they go 11-6 next year, when the AFC South, nobody's going to worry about this one bit. Because at the end of the day, it's a zero-sum business. You got to win. That's what it all comes down to. Any idea of who he's going to bring? Any words of, coordinators, any other guys to fill out the coaching staff that you're hearing?
I'm still waiting for the Jaguars to send out the official announcement. I've been like on pins and needles. I came into work early this morning because we were sitting around waiting last night. I told people that morning, I was like, I think it's going to happen today. They were like, oh, you're crazy. 11 o'clock last night, it finally started. Boom, 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 boom. There it is. And then now we're sitting here. His wife's even changed her header on Twitter. And the team sending out memes of the Rizzler, but they can't send out the official announcement. I'm like, come on, man, help me out. That's what I'm waiting on. So no, I don't have the tea leaves on the staff just yet. We'll see who he ultimately decides to bring in as coordinators. I think that's important. I think he's got to nail the defensive coordinator. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to convince Patrick Graham to come on his staff as the DC, to give him a little bit of an experienced ear there. I mean, there's some other guys that are probably hanging around. Shane Waldron was on the staff with the Rams with him, was the offensive coordinator for Chicago last year and was laid off. He's a guy who Liam Coen has a relationship with going back to LA. And he's talked about their relationship previously and could be an option to be on the staff somewhere. So those are a couple of names that I'd probably be keeping an eye on to say he'd probably be trying to land them.
Jaguars haven't brought the boom yet when it comes to putting a social media post out there. One name I'm going to give you, Brian Picucci, assistant offensive line coach of the Bucs last year. Long history with Liam Coen. That could be one of the guys. He coached
him, right?
Yeah, so that could be one of those guys that goes with Liam, because the consensus around here in Tampa is that there's not going to be a big uprising because he's only here 1 year. There's not going to be a bunch of guys that goes with him, but Brian Picucci, that's a guy to keep an eye out for. Before I let you go, just your thoughts of this whole process of Liam Coen and the excitement overall there in Jacksonville. They're trying to crush my mentions today. I've gotten more tweets from guys with 112 followers today than ever before. I'm like, damn, bro. I was like, I just said I wouldn't do the same thing. I was like, hey, if I'm I can't fault the Jaguars. Like, hey, go out and get your man. But I mean, overall, man, I saw the post from, I think it was 1010XL this morning, and their whole crew was going crazy and they're dancing. Like, that's what I love about sports, man. It evokes emotions. People are pissed, people rejoice. But yeah, just speaking as a guy that's there, Jamal, like, I mean, it's got to be pretty awesome right there to get your guy.
This reinvigorated this fan base. I mean, this fan base had been struggling with the fact that this week, I mean, this has cranked it up to 100 again. I mean, the belief has there's hope, radiating through the fan base again, because you fired Doug, but you kept Trent, which was like a letdown. And then you go through the whole thing. Oh man, who's going to want to work with Trent? And then Ben Johnson goes off the board because they're like, okay, well, maybe they'll land Ben and it'll all work out. He's off the board, and they're like, oh man, and it's got to be Liam. And right before, the reports are rolling out, Liam's opted out, so it hits a new low of just, who's it going to be? It's going to be Robert Saleh or Patrick Graham, and I'm like, my head will explode if they try and hire and pass that off as like, we got our guy. It was never going to work. So it hit a new low, and then it immediately, like, it's this upswing of, oh, Trent's gone. Mm-hmm. Oh, they got Liam, like of complete 180 to get it back to where it's at this high. And it feels like folks are excited again. And if they can land a general manager with a solid track record from somewhere to replace Trent, not to just, pillage the Tampa Bay team, but, Mike Greenberg is a guy that Liam Coen.
No. You stay away from Greenberg, man. You stay away from Greenberg. We thought he was going to be with the Jets. That's his hometown team. They'll be taking him, man. You leave him.
Hey, if Mike Greenberg wanted to come up to Jacksonville, that would work.
He's taking everybody from us.
Just taking everybody, Hey, it looks like Larry, isn't Foote going up to Detroit? Isn't that where he's connected?
Yeah, him and Casey Rogers. They needed some changes on the defensive side of the ball. So I was like, all right. Well, you know what? Breaking news here. We're actually putting in a claim for Jamal St to come work here in Tampa. So you can have Liam. We're gonna have Jamal here.
Yeah,
we're gonna have to do it, man. Well, you're under contract, so we're gonna have to make a trade. So we'll send you some stuff up there because it's gonna. You're not cheap, man. We're gonna have to make sure that we take care of you to get you down here. The one and only Jamal St here, WJXT up there in Jacksonville. Enjoy your weekend, my friend, and enjoy. I feel like you're the homecoming king. Well, I was homecoming king. I was the homecoming king. You're the prom king, but you got the head cheerleader. So congratulations, my friend. Be well, and thanks for your time. We'll talk soon.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, buddy. Love that guy. Again, one of the most talented guys in the country. Don't be surprised if he's only there for a little while longer before he goes mainstream and gets a national gig too. Love Jamal St here. He's unbelievable. Follow him on the social media now, especially because I think it's cool to see. All right, listen, you get pissed off about the whole Liam Coen thing, right? But now it's like, all right, well, what happens next? What's that introductory press conference like? What is the media? How do they handle this entire thing? I think it's pretty damn cool. How about this? New York Islanders have just signed defenseman Tony DeAngelo to a 1-year contract. What are we even doing? Tony DeAngelo? Oh my God. Go look up Tony DeAngelo and what he's done in his career. And he's going to play for Lou Lamoriello and the New York Islanders. What the hell is that? All right, let's finish the show the only way we know how, and that is my predictions for the NFC and AFC Championship games. We're going to start with the late game at 6:30 Sunday night in Kansas City. The Chiefs host the Buffalo Bills. The Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, they're looking to go back to back to back. After the win last week against Houston, they welcome in Josh Allen and Sean McDermott and the Bills. This is the next step in their maturation. This is what they think they need to do to kind of set them on course to win a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, for all of my Buffalo friends out there, Dan and Dom and everybody else, I think this is where your Cinderella story runs out. Taylor Rapp ruled out, so you're not going to have him at the safety position. You're going to start a rookie against the Chiefs, and it's been a great story. Josh Allen was flawless against the Baltimore Ravens. But I don't see Kansas City making this last week in that game. They're just too good. Too many guys on the defensive side of the ball on the defensive line. Looking at George Karlaftis with 3 sacks last week. They had 8 total. You had Chris Jones that he could play an even bigger role this week. I look at the guys on the offensive side of the ball. You have Kareem Hunt turning back the clock. Isaiah Pacheco running like a little kid that stole candy from his older brother. You got DeAndre Hopkins. You have Travis Kelce. I think when you look at this situation, the Bills have done such a great job into getting to this point. but I just think they don't have enough horses, whether it's offensively in the passing game or guys on the defensive side of the ball that are going to be able to slow down Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. So I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs winning this game. And I don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be like 24-17. Let's go 24-17 Kansas City Chiefs. All right. For the other game, Sunday, 3:00, Washington Commanders travel to Philly to take on the Eagles, their NFC East rivals. Is this where their Cinderella story ends? I am going to say no. I am going out on a limb, and I think that the Washington Commanders upset the Philadelphia Eagles to advance to the Super Bowl to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. And here's the reason why. I don't like what I've seen from Jalen Hurts. There's just something off. And the lack of chemistry in the passing game with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, I just, there's something missing there. Are you going to get 200 yards from Saquon Barkley every week? I don't think you can. And I think they have enough time to be able to look at what these other teams were unable to do against Saquon and be able to just limit him. Keep everything in front of you. It's not about stacking the box. And we saw that with the Rams. Put 8 guys in there, put 9 guys in there. No, because if he busts one of those gaps, he's taking it to the house. I think Dan Quinn, as being one of the better defensive minds that we've seen the last couple of decades here in the Tampa Bay area, will formulate a game plan to keep the ball in the hands of Jalen Hurts. And if you're telling me it's between Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels, I'm going with Jaden Daniels. I think Nakobe Dean, not having him at the linebacker position, I think they were able to kind of stem the tide last week. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that this week. I think it would be a fantastic story if Jaden Daniels in his rookie season was able to go into Tampa and win, go into Detroit and win, and then go into Philadelphia and win. Think about that. Rookie quarterback, and he's able to beat the number 3, the number 1, and the number 2 seeds en route to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. If that happens, I still have Kansas City winning. But I just think that there's something off with that Philadelphia Eagles offense. And I think when you look at what Jaden's been able to do, when you have Brian Robinson in the backfield, Austin Eckler in the backfield, I think you have the ultimate safety net at the tight end position with Zach Ertz, 3rd down, 4th down, red zone. You think he's going to be motivated to go against his old club? NFC Championship game, Zach Ertz, tight end for the Washington Commanders against the team that drafted him. That dude is in store for a big game. And Terry McLaurin, you could talk about Darius Slay and the job that he's done, but I still think I look at Terry McLaurin. I think that's an advantage Washington. They're going to need De'Ami Brown. They're going to need Olamide Zaccheaus. They need all of those guys to be able to step up. They've done it so far. And if Jaden Daniels can take care of the football and he can run and extend plays, get those first downs, keep his eyes on down the field, I like Washington in this game. I do. I'm going to go with him. And my guy, Nick in Sarasota, I know you're a big Eagles guy. Ertz is inevitable on 4th down. He is. How do you feel, Nick, about the game this weekend? And I'm not hating on the Eagles because I wouldn't be surprised if they won. But I feel like there's something good about Washington right now where if you just look at it quarterback to quarterback, I have more faith in even a young rookie in Jaden Daniels, so 100% healthy, rather than a guy like Jalen Hurts, who clearly just doesn't seem like he's firing on all cylinders. I don't know. But that is why you play the game. And also, the Australian Open sucks. I was up late last night to watch Novak Djokovic to take on Alexander Zverev. He lost the first set tiebreak, and then he had to retire. Not retire from the sport. I wish they had a different word for it, but retire from the match. He's jacked up. Fans were booing him. I thought it was a little classless. But, hey, it's a back and forth. You know how that Australian crowd is. That's something you kind of have to deal with. But Zverev moves on to take on Yannick Sinner, who beat Ben Shelton, our Florida Gator, last night. So Zverev against Sinner. I'm going to go with Sinner in that one. I think he wins that in 4 sets. And then on the women's side, Sabalenka against Madison Keys. It'll be early tonight. It's always weird to say it's 3:30 in the morning, so past midnight tonight. So it's early Saturday morning at 3:30 a.m. If you stay up for it, if you get up early for it, Arena Sabalenka against our girl Madison Keys. We're pulling for the American. I think Sabalenka ends up winning this in 3 sets, but man, I would be happy to be wrong. A big thank you to everybody that joined us on the program today. Wow, what a show. Our most highly attended show that we've had so far. Greg Auman and Scott Reynolds. What a great thing that we did there. I love that. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Can't wait to put that up on social media so you guys can go check it out. Also, Mark Ogden from ESPN talking all things Manchester United and the Glazers. Phenomenal. And then we end with our guy Jamal St here from Jacksonville. What a great perspective to see how the fans and the media and just everybody up in Duval are taking this entire situation in stride, because we are definitely still pissed here in the Tampa Bay area. Follow me on all social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok. I am everywhere right here at J Recher. Love you, Amir. And then like and subscribe. Man, I got a bunch of different subscribers today on the show. People were subscribing. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 by the end of the month. I'm at 882. Please do what you can to subscribe. Let's get up to 1,000. That was a promise I made to my nephew, and hopefully we can continue on that path. I said it before. I'll say it again today. Monday, not live at noon. I'll be live at 1 p.m. on Monday. I have the fireside chat with Julian Brisebois over there at Amalie Arena. So when I hop on at 1 o'clock, we'll talk about the latest Bucs news, AFC and NFC Conference Championship recaps, and also what I heard from Julian Brisebois and how the Lightning did in Chicago and Detroit. So again, Monday, starting at 1, not noon. Don't forget. I love you guys. I can't thank you all for the support. Have a great weekend. Be safe. It's Gasparilla out there. People are crazy out on the water. People are crazy out on the road. Be smart. Be safe. And I'll see you Monday right here on the J Recher podcast. I am gone.